monsters, madness, and magic.
Alright, folks, welcome to the Monsters, Madness, and Magic podcast. I'm your host, Justin, here with a quick word before we dive in. Now, in this episode, I chat with actor Betsy Baker about the legacy of the Evil Dead, the Beyond Belief Factor fiction revival, her musical background, why she did not return as Linda in The Evil Dead 2, and more. As always, thank you all for listening out there, and without further ado, here you go. Okay, Betsy.
Yes, sir.
Take us back in time. You're a youngster. Are you a book reader, fort builder, troublemaker, or all of the above?
So it was book reader, fort builder,
Troublemaker,
troublemaker.
or all of the above?
I'm going to say 2 out of 3. I was a book reader. I have actually we were just talking about books the other night, but believe it or not, I was really into making forts.
Indoor or outdoor?
Really into making forts in the living room with, pillows and card tables. And I also actually really got into making forts in my backyard if I could find an old blanket that my mother would let me use, or maybe some scraps of wood or trees. And I would say, I could live out here if I could just get food out here, and I probably could spend the night out here. I don't know if I ever did, but I sure as hell gave it a good shot.
Did you live in the countryside or in a wooded area? Or?
No, well, we lived in a small town, but there was one time when I was about 10 or 11 and I had a Schwinn bike, and there was a wood supply store literally like a half mile, and I had a basket in the front, and they were giving away like 14 by 14 plywood slats. I'm telling you, honey, I brought about 90 of those back home, and we lived on the side of a ravine in a city, but the tree was perfect for making a fort. And then about day 5, it was just like all I was doing was hammering and hammering. And I said, wait a minute, let's stop. There has to be more fun than this. So I enjoyed my fort for a long time.
What state was this, by the way?
Michigan. I grew up in the southwest corner of Michigan.
Okay, gotcha. Well, you did say that you like to read books, so did you have an author or a genre that you lean towards?
When I was little, I'm talking from the time I could read until, then you're assigned reading, and then I didn't get so exciting. I loved biographies. I loved to read about Betsy Ross or Clara Barton, America's First Nurse. I loved biographies.
Okay. Are you still a reader?
Yeah, I'm still a reader. I'm not a slow reader. I'm just I don't concentrate well, and I like to hold books. I don't like the Kindles or the audios. I like to have a book in my hands. Yeah.
Me as well.
Which often then falls on the floor at night if I'm reading, or but yeah, I'm a hand holder book reader.
I'm old school too. I like to collect books as well. Even if I never read it, if I ever need it, it's on the shelf.
Well, I may have some here that I just was having a discussion with a friend that we just need to downsize and get rid of these books. I'm not going to read them again. Let somebody else have the joy rather than just the bookshelf enjoying it for 15, 20 years, or color coded correctly. So yeah, this spring I'm tossing and purging.
Oh, I may be interested in some of those.
I don't know, but.
So would you say that, was there anyone else in your family, parents, what have you, were they artistically, creatively inclined? You think that's where some of your roots came from?
Oh, yeah, sure. I think so. My father, who has since passed away, but my father was in the church choir for many years, and he actually ended up taking piano lessons in his late 60s and 70s. And my brother plays the piano very well. He plays by ear, and he played the violin, and my sister played the flute and the piano. So, yeah, sometimes when we were young, there were like mini recitals when people came over. And my sister and I danced, and it was pretty ridiculous. But in the same respect, I'm a firm believer of helping a child find that creative venue. So my parents were very good at that.
Now, correct me if I'm wrong. I know you sing as well, but did you pick up an instrument?
I never did, except the piano. I play the piano fairly well, but I never did. No. I wish I had. I mean, I'd like to learn still how to play the accordion, which I know is probably not something you were thinking I was going to say, but I would like to learn how to play the accordion. I didn't say learn well, but I'd like to play the accordion or understand its workings. But no, piano, flute, violin, nope, never did.
So were you singing from performing from a young age? When did you discover you had a singing voice?
Uh, well, I don't know if I discovered it, but when we started doing, mini recitals for my grandparents or for people who came over for bridge club or something, and we were, my brother would play the piano and I would sing. I thought, well, this is kind of fun. This is kind of fun. So I did that a lot, but as I think a lot of kids do.
Yeah. So your first time as a performer on stage, was that singing or was it acting in maybe a school play or something like that?
Uh, yeah, I think it was acting in a school play. Actually, it was one of the first times was a dance recital, and the dance teacher had me sing a song called "Grandma, It's You." No classic. I know you probably.
I'm not familiar with that one.
That's okay. And so they got their bang for their buck. They had some dancers sing songs as well as dance, so they got a real bargain at the spring recital. So that was in, I would say, second or third grade. And then in fifth grade, I was cast as the Grinch in The Grinch Who Stole Christmas.
Well, that's a good one.
Yeah, that was fun. Yeah.
So when it comes to, sticking with your childhood, would you say, looking back, did you have more fun performing as a singer or you're starting acting?
Oh, I think I had more fun acting. Yeah.
Mm, mm,
I sang professionally after college graduation, and I actually started out in voice and music therapy in college. It takes a tremendous amount of discipline and to keep a voice toned and in tune and taking care of your throat. And uh, it just it was always challenging for me. So although I love to sing, I think in the long run I probably loved to perform theatrically.
mm.
I don't know about more, but yeah.
So would you say that stage fright was ever an issue for you at all?
No, I actually wasn't really I wasn't a victim of stage fright. I know have some friends who were and are severely afflicted with it. Uh, I just guess from a very early age, what's the worst that can happen? I can just go out there and mess up. My parents will still love me, and I'll still be in school on Monday. So I kind of somehow early on went in with that, and I do remember knowing my lines or knowing my songs, and yeah, I never really had bad stage fright. I don't think.
That's great. So when you think back to formative films and TV shows that you grew up on, what comes to mind?
I really didn't. If I went to the movie theater, well, I'll tell you, I really, when I was younger, we got to go see Mary Poppins. We got to go see things like that, and that was just amazing to me. I just wanted to be Mary Poppins. I wanted to do Mary Poppins. I wanted to live in Mary Poppins land, things like that, and The Sound of Music and things like that. And I, from the time that I was able to finish my homework on time, and I would love to watch the Carol Burnett show.
Mm.
Carol Burnett show was a classic and was way ahead of its time. The Lucille Ball show was a classic. I mean, I actually wrote my one and only fan letter to Richard Chamberlain, who rest his soul just passed away, but in Dr. Kildare. I loved those dramas, and you had the music and then you had the commercial break and they're still in the coma when you come out, when you come back. It was just like, oh my gosh. But in all honesty, TV was a great time in the 60s and the 70s. So, yeah.
Did you ever hear back from that fan letter?
Did, but not in the way I wanted to. But I actually wrote him and said that I thought I would be a good actress on his TV show, and could he please, I could come out with my mother because I knew they shot in California, and you could meet me and I could show you how well I could lay still. I mean, that's what I wrote at, 9 or 10 years old in a hospital bed. And what I got instead was a form letter, says, thank you so much for writing Richard Chamberlain, attached. Please find a, 8 by 10 headshot that you requested, which I had not requested. I didn't need any pictures. I just wanted to be flown out to California. So it was a hard moment in my life.
Oh.
Yeah.
So Betsy, obviously, you've come from a musical family, like you said. What records were spinning around the house when you were growing up?
Well, we had an old console, yeah, like an RCA console. There was not much music played on that console except during the holiday and Christmas season. And then it was, every night, every night. And we played those albums. But my father was a Heathkit builder. I don't know if any of your following knows Heathkit and Plumberton, but my father had built a couple radios, and I was lucky enough to have one of those radios by my bedside. And I would just listen to the teenage radio stations, Leslie Gore and the Beatles and Herman's Hermits, and later on the Monkees, and yeah, Petula Clark, yeah, the Association, the song Cherish and things. I mean, you're way too young for that, but those were great songs. Those were great songs, and those were the ones that lulled me to sleep. Yeah, sort of.
Would you say that you were a big concert goer growing up? Did you go to see any live
No,
shows?
I was not a big concert grower growing up. We lived in a small town. And even when I was in college, I didn't see a lot of concerts. Although I dated a guy who really, really loved concerts. And he was really a follower of a lot of music. And one of my first concerts when I was just dating him, after a few days, we went to see David Bowie, which I went, okay, wow. He comes out of a spaceship. I just didn't connect all the dots. But I also saw concerts at the university. I saw Cleo Lane, which was nothing like David Bowie. I saw Chuck Mangione. I saw Bette Midler. But I didn't go to a lot of rock and roll concerts.
So, a question I like to ask everyone, and take it whichever direction you want to go with it, is what scared you as a kid?
Oh, gosh. Hmm. I think as a young kid, let's see, things under the bed, you know, uh, things in the closet, all not there, but I perceived they may have been there, and what would happen if they were. I don't think I was a fearful child. I didn't really push the boundaries a lot. Like I didn't ride my bike off a cliff, checking to see if it would hurt or something. But I listen, back then too, you were given a lot more range. You could go literally off in your bike for miles and just be home, by the time you hear the train go by at, 5:10. So you had a pretty big window. But when you don't know anything else, then it was just a free for all, wonderful life. But I don't think I was deeply fearful of things.
That's good.
That's an interesting question.
Thank you. So you mentioned earlier, you did the Grinch in fifth grade. When you start, do you do more? Would you classify yourself as a theater kid, like going into high school and stuff like that?
Oh yeah, I was in the drama clubs and I tried out for plays and had some great parts in plays and our high school was really involved in doing 3 or 4 or 5 plays and variety shows throughout the year. I was not in the band, but I was in the choir and was active in the theatrical production. So that was always, and I was also active. I actually think once I got a driver's license and didn't have to be driven around, I could also participate in the local community, theater things in the city during the summer. And they had a lot of summer theater.
Mm.
So yeah.
So when it comes to theater, what would you say are a handful of your favorite roles that you played?
Well, they're mostly musical theater.
Okay.
Uh, I didn't do a lot of drama, but gosh, I did everything from Peter Pan. I did The Music Man. I was in a short-lived national tour of a musical called Barbary Coast about the opium addictions in San Francisco during the gold rush. You can understand why I probably didn't go far. Uh, Gosh, I did Bye Bye Birdie was one of my favorites. I did 42nd Street. I did Guys and Dolls. When the local theaters did productions like that, you could always end up being a dancer, a singer, or an ensemble member.
Hmm.
It was always fun. It was a lot of fun.
Have you done anything on the stage since those days, or any desire to try it again?
Yeah, I haven't done anything for a few years. I've done in my older years, actually I consider this stage, but I did a lot of improv and I came to improv very late in life. I'm really glad I did, and I really, really miss it. But uh, I did a lot of improv here in Los Angeles, and I actually did oh my gosh, did a play with Catherine Ross and Drake Hodgson from the Days of Our Lives. What was it called? It was about the last days of Nuremberg. It was the Nuremberg trial. I
Oh,
can't even remember. I'm drawing a total blank, but that was the last thing I've done. That was a few years ago.
okay.
Yeah.
So what was your first professional acting job? What was The Evil Dead your very first professional job?
You mean on film or on
Yeah,
stage?
like from post stage, I guess.
Um, well, yeah, actually, Evil Dead was one of the first, if not the first, theatrical production because I had trained in college in live stage production, and then went and sang professionally in Florida for about a year. I came back to Michigan and moved to Detroit. I'm not from Detroit, but I moved there and I wanted to learn about film and TV production. And you might say, well, why would you go there? And I knew at the time that the city of Detroit was really, really bustling in the mid to late 70s in terms of industrial films, which were our training films. And I thought that was a really great way of learning the craft, even if it was camera and lighting and sound and placement and things like that, even if you were talking about a car engine. And I was right. I mean, I learned a lot. But in Detroit, Sam Raimi and Rob Tappert called my agent and said, we'd like to meet her for a possible, part in a movie. And that's about all they said. And they also didn't want to, come to the agent's office and rent out space or a camera. They just wanted to have an interview. So we met at a restaurant. And then Sam asked if I would like to come to his house, maybe this coming Saturday, and you could read a couple of scenes with Bruce Campbell. But it really wasn't his house, it was his parents' house because he was still living at home. So I knocked on the door. I said yes, and I knocked on the door, drove myself there because I was a full-grown adult, not living in my parents' home, and knocked on the door. And she said yes. Oh, Sammy and the boys are downstairs. Go on downstairs. So I walked down to the basement, and there they were. And so I auditioned for that, and hence became a cast member of The Evil Dead, which was in fact my first feature film. Not my first film, because one of my first films was indeed a lot of industrial films about cars and engines. But my very first film was a training film about how to do paint by number. I don't know who needs to watch a film about, matching green number 7 with number 7 on the canvas, but apparently they did, and I said I'll do it. So there was a lot. It wasn't so much a close up of me; it was a close up of my hand and my fingers, going from the 7 pot of sage green over to the 7 Leaf on a paid by number. But by gum, got me my SAG card, so there you go.
Was that because I see about the same time that you're credited with Evil Dead, you also have a movie called Word of Honor. Was is that what you're
Uh,
is that what you're talking about?
Word of Honor came, let's see, well, I know exactly when it was. It came about a year, like we did Evil Dead in 79, and I think I did Word of Honor in 80, or I think it was 80 or 81. That was just truly a magnificent gift. And I'm not sure at the time I knew of the depth of I mean, I knew I was fortunate and I went through the whole series of auditions, but a production company headed by Alex Karras and Susan Clark came to Detroit to film and produce the CBS movie of the week there on location, as they call it. But I worked with God, some of the greats. I mean, Carl Malden. Carl Malden played my father. Rue McClanahan played my mother. John Marley played the newspaper editor. Ron Silver was a lawyer. John Malkovich played my fiance
Wow.
and then husband. Yeah, it was, I think, one of the only TV movies he did, and directed by Mel Damsky. It was a very timely film at the time. It was, about a newspaper reporter not divulging information. And it was just an amazing experience. It
Wow.
really was
Quite a contrast from Evil Dead.
quite a contrast.
It's funny that you said that you had you at least got to go to lunch with Sam prior to going to his house. And I was speaking to with Teresa. I know you've probably heard all this, but she was saying how she was thrown off because there was no official audition. You just had to go to this guy's house and go meet him in this basement. And she was just like, "This is kind of weird."
It's kind of weird. Yeah. I mean, even going to the restaurant was weird. I was dating this guy who used to take me to concerts. And I said, look, now if I don't come out of this restaurant, it was a very popular restaurant, but I thought, oh my God, this is so weird. Nobody had ever asked me to come to a restaurant and meet them for a possible part in a movie. It just sounds shady. And back in the 70s, it was shady. And I said, if I don't come out in about 45 minutes, you come in, or call the police. I don't even think they had 911 back in that last century. But yeah, we never even met for lunch. They actually wanted to know if I just wanted a Coca-Cola or a Pepsi. Never said, do you want to have some lunch or anything? But Sam, Rob, and me in the corner of this restaurant, which I had heard just sadly just closed.
Oh,
Yeah, yeah. But it was kind of weird. Teresa's right. It was weird. Yeah.
and speaking with Teresa, she was just speaking personally. She mentioned she didn't have the best time filming the Evil Dead. Just because of the conditions and the location and all that stuff. When you look back, are your thoughts similar on the actual filming of the movie?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean,
Mm.
it was really we were all very, very young, and we worked in a cabin that absolutely had no bathroom, no heat, no electricity, no comfort. What you saw in that cabin on that film is what you got, and probably less. I know, and we shot a lot of nights, which was very cold and very damp. We didn't have coffee machines. We didn't, actually. I make it sound like we, shot it in the Middle Ages, but you didn't even have individual water bottles like you do now. It probably was a good thing. Um, you had a glass of water before you left the house where we were all staying, and that was it, till the next morning. That was your intake of water. It was grueling, and even if you had dirt or Karo syrup poured on you during the shooting, there was no real place there to rinse off or dry. You just took a washcloth and got it wet with something, whatever was around, and tried to rinse it off for the next take. Yeah, it was pretty grueling.
Yeah. Just how remote was the cabin from you guys? Maybe like going to get something to eat, or just going to back to the
It was
house, like you're
pretty
saying.
remote. Sam and Robin Bruce found basically, or their location manager found a rental place in a neighborhood that probably didn't understand why all these young people were coming in and out of it at, you know, 7 at night and coming back home at 6 in the morning. But it was a good, 5-10 minute drive into the countryside. There was
Hmm.
nobody else around us. um, when we shot, except for a couple times when people were a little curious why these two or three cars were driving down this, dirt road to get to the cabin.
Yeah, and obviously, in retrospect, we all know how important of a horror movie Evil Dead is. Had did you have any experience like watching horror movies or enjoy horror movies or anything growing up?
No, and no, and no. I do not like horror movies. I did not like horror movies. The only horror movie, and that question is asked a lot, and it's a good question, but I did not. The only thing I used to see a little bit of the Twilight Zone.
Hmm.
Those were scary. You
Yeah.
know, when somebody dies and they keep getting phone calls. I remember this one particular episode, and then they discovered that the phone line was across their graveyard, across the gravestone or whatever. That to me is still scary. Um, that's the only thing I watched that gave me any reference. And I had also seen a movie called Rosemary's Baby. And at the time they didn't call it I don't think they called it a horror movie. I think they called it like a psychological thriller. But to me, it was all of that and above. That's the only reference I had.
Hmm. When my wife and I are watching, if we're watching TV, we're either watching Seinfeld or The Twilight Zone. So I'm with you.
Really?
Yeah, it's a contrast, but that's what we like.
Yeah. Yeah, that I didn't watch a lot of, and especially when I babysat, neighbors' kids. At that time, again, back in the last century, the TV went off the air at like 11 p.m. or 12 midnight. I mean, it went off. And if the parents were not home from their evening, I just sat there. Actually, now that you say that, that actually scared me. I just sat there, because there was nothing, no noise, no nothing. I could read, but who thought to bring a book? I just thought they'd be home by 10:30 or so. And so the last thing I wanted to watch, even as a teenager, was The Twilight Zone.
Yeah.
'Cause something could be then come knocking at the door. And so,
So another thing that Teresa mentioned when I spoke with her is that obviously, when you're reading the script, you get this question a lot. The more extreme things that appear in the Evil Dead are not in the script. It's just in script format.
right.
So when those things do play out when you guys are filming, what are you thinking? Like, specifically the tree scene, which comes up.
Yeah, well, I don't know if you discussed that with Teresa. The tree scene ended up being a hell of a lot different than it's written in the script. And a lot of it, somebody asked us the other day, well, did you do a lot of improv? And I had said, no, we didn't do a lot of improv. But that particular scene, there was a lot of improv or last minute changes. That particular scene, there were times when Sam Raimi, the director, would just kind of go off and say, well, we've got film rolling. Now do it this way. Now the film's still rolling. Now do it this way. We gave him things to work with in terms of editing, but you could also see his mind just going wackadoodle crazy in terms of what if we went that way. The tree scene was also, yeah, fairly graphic for its time. And the reason it then worked is I don't know to this day if it was planned when they shot it, but of course you probably know that it was edited in reverse. So in that respect, for the horror and the terror and the torture portion of it, that worked great. But none of us knew that was happening when it was shot, or none of us knew that that might be what they were trying to perceive. And I have no, I've never actually really talked to Bruce or Sam about it as to whether, well, did you just run the tape backwards accidentally one day when you were editing, or was it something that you planned later? I don't really know. It'd be an interesting question to ask them. And I'm going to see Bruce in a few weeks. So if I remember, I'll ask him.
Great.
Not that Bruce Campbell will tell me the truth, but whatever.
Speaking of Bruce, what was your first impression when you met him?
Oh, Bruce is charming. He is good looking. He's funny. He's adorable. He was adorable. Now he's more, aged like I am. So there's no criticism there. But yeah, and the fact that I got to play across him as his girlfriend was just like, oh my gosh, this is great. This is wonderful.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I truly, it didn't give me anything like, "Ooh, I'm playing, opposite the lead." It just was an enjoyable experience to be playing, against him. And it was when I was on the set. I know this sounds like I was really deep into the film, and there were times that I was, but it was always really interesting to watch Sam work and Bruce work, and communicate with each other, between takes and between sets. It was, I learned a lot too, as um, amateurish in some ways and low budget as the film was, you could sit and watch these creative minds, work. And I think that's another question comes up, and maybe you were going to ask it, did you ever think this was going to come to fruition? Was it going to actually turn into a feature film? And there were nights when we thought, you know what, we're just doing this. It's never going to happen. They're never going to finish it. They didn't get that scene. They didn't get the cut to edit, but they did, and it worked. And the one thing that I will always give people like Sam Raimi credit for is that um, he was so passionate about this project that you were in the presence of someone who could still crack a joke and could still eat, a chicken dinner next to you, but was still, on the set had these creative ideas that some of which none of us had ever seen on a film or a, movie screen before. So
And you mentioned earlier, which is it's crazy for me to think about because it is a horror movie, obviously, but there's some humor and the campy nature of it. It just seems to me from the outside looking in that there would have been a lot more improv with all the camp nature of the movie.
there was some improv, but not so much with the verbal lines. Once we found, you know, like a sweet spot or where Sam wanted a scene to go, if it was improv, he would have write the lines, and we would write them down, and he would want them verbatim for a number of reasons. It allowed him to, edit it easier and everything like that, and we were not tremendously skilled. Not that we are today. We're not tremendously skilled actors, so he knew he kind of had to keep it under control.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
So you just said a couple minutes ago that you get asked, and you didn't think it would come to fruition. You know, they didn't get this cut, this scene, or whatever. But when you did see the final product for the first time, what were your initial thoughts?
Same thing. No, I'm kidding. I was not at the premiere. I was actually working an auto show, so I could not attend the premiere. So I didn't see it with the huge crowd and the ooh la la. And I actually saw it here in Los Angeles when it was filming at a theater with with another boyfriend who was since became my husband. And it was, in that respect, in the early 80s, was just a really poor quality film. Poor meaning, there were glitches in the editing and the cutting and the sound, and it was scary though. It was scary, but there were some campy moments that actually people laugh to this day, and it wasn't filmed to be funny. A particular scene wasn't filmed to be funny, but because I think of our youthful ages and our naivete and our unskilled acting qualities, there were some funny scenes. I mean, one of them is, how they cut Ash and Linda on the couch when he gives her this just kind of god awful necklace, and she actually loves it. It's just a magnifying glass, people, and she loves it and tells Ash she will never take it off. And Sam had fun with the close-ups of the eyes and the game, and you add the music and you add the suspense, and it came off kind of funny. And yet, I believe everybody has lived that innocent part of life where, you're first dating, or this could lead into kissing or something more, and so that was a very sweet. It was a sweet, funny scene that I think was meant to be sweet. I don't know about funny though.
I was telling Teresa the same thing. Fans of horror movies, there are certain movies that we can remember the first time we ever saw them. It's like The Exorcist, Jaws, and Evil Dead is one of them. And specifically, the "We're Gonna Get You" scene. For me, when I was a kid, I was I was done at that point, like completely terrified. And also, one of the most terrifying things to me, still to this day, is the tape itself. Like just the audio tape of the doctor and the Kandar thing. Yeah, that it was really effective.
Yeah, yeah. No, Sam does some things incredibly well. And somebody described it one time that Sam Raimi has in his films that he can create and he can have control of. He takes you up a roller coaster, and a lot of times in a mystery or a thriller, it goes in ebbs and flows, and it takes you somewhere and then lets you breathe, and it takes you up a little more and lets you breathe. Like Sam just goes, and you never know where that cart is going to drop and how far. And it was a good analogy. Yeah, yeah. I when I see it, and sometimes at conventions we do commentaries, and I still jump. I mean, really, it was just playing at a theater literally about a mile from my house yesterday. I don't know why they chose to have Evil Dead be shown on Easter Sunday, but uh, they did. And somebody said, "Are you going to go? Let's go." And I went, "Well, no, I've seen it. I'll let that seat go to somebody else." But it still scares me sometimes. And I was in it, and I was there that night we shot it. That there are still scenes that are done incredibly well in terms of just a simple scare technique.
So, is there a moment that you can remember when you realized yourself how big this movie was in the horror circles? Was it when you started going to conventions or something along those lines?
Yeah, in late 2001, I think it was. I was contacted and asked and invited to a screening of the recut digitalized, improved um, version of Evil Dead, and I was asked to come and be a guest, and they wanted to know if I could, give them Teresa's contact info because we had remained friends. And no, I don't know. We could go, but it's Halloween. We have young kids. We'd like to go trick or treating. They said, well, we can't really change the date. Okay, we'll go, but we're gonna have to leave right away. And so we'll just go there. We'll get there. And it was in downtown Hollywood. We couldn't park, and we drove around and around and around looking for parking spaces. The reason many of the parking spaces were gone on that night is because Evil Dead was playing at the Egyptian, and the line was around the block. And we had no idea that that's what they were in line for until we finally found a parking place. And it had been sold out within like 6 hours of, you know, going up, tickets for sale. And we had no idea, literally no idea that there was this big cult following for Evil Dead.
Another thing that Teresa mentioned after the film wrapped up was that she really wanted to get away from making movies after that experience, and kind of even the horror genre itself. Did you experience that as well? Obviously, we talked about the movie that you went into right after that.
Yeah, no, I didn't experience, I mean, I didn't actually really think that where I was living in Detroit would offer, more horror film opportunities. But, it was one of those things like, I'm done. I need to kind of take a break for a couple of weeks. But, I was more than happy to do more work.
Hmm.
Yeah.
So something I'm still confused by, even to this day, as a fan of the franchise, is whether Evil Dead 2 is a complete reboot or if it's a sequel. It's kind of like in the middle. Was there ever any talks to bring you back as Linda, or was that just?
Yeah. Yeah. In 1986, I think they started filming yeah. In 1986, once again, Sam and Bruce and Rob contacted me. And you had to go look for somebody if you wanted to connect with them. There were no cell phones, no computers. You could ask your parents, you could call their parents and say, has John moved or has Sally moved? Where can I, do they have a phone number in their house or their apartment? Um, I don't know actually how they found me, but I was living in Los Angeles. They had moved to Los Angeles, and we met again at a restaurant for breakfast this time. And they asked me to play the part of Linda in Evil Dead 2. But I was pregnant.
Mm.
My husband and I got married, and it's about 2 years later, I was pregnant. I obviously couldn't change my schedule. They couldn't change the shooting schedule because they were under a lot of limitations. And so sadly, it just didn't work out. I wasn't so sad about it then because I didn't trust their mischievous, like, okay, are you going to protect me? Are you going to make me safe? Or, is it going to be better conditions on the set? They couldn't promise that, but they just wanted me for Linda in Evil Dead 2, but I couldn't do it because I was going to have a baby.
Do you know if they were using the same cabin?
Wow. I don't know if I knew that. And if I knew the answer to that, I don't know it today. I know, I think they were filming it all in the Los Angeles area.
Okay.
It was because it was more of a studio picture. They had less control. I know they had less control over Evil Dead 1 was their own, backyard, basement, neighborhood investors thing. Evil Dead 2 took on a whole another monster,
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah.
So, over the years, you've done your fair share of film and television work. Just as an actress, when it comes to your part of the work, do you have a preference between the two?
The two
Between television or film, like, do you enjoy one more than the other?
Well, television moves at a much, much faster pace, I think. I like them both. I like them both. I don't have a favorite.
Mm-hmm.
I just know that television moves a lot faster because they're under a much more constricted time frame.
Gotcha.
Anyway, from what I perceive.
So one of my favorite TV shows growing up, and I did not know that they just revived it, is Beyond Belief Fact or Fiction.
Mm-hmm.
And I had no idea that it was back, and I had no idea that you were in it. So how did that come about for you? Was it a typical audition?
It was a lot of fun. It was just literally one day and that's something where, we just got to snap it. We got to do it. We got 9 days to do this production. And they called and I said, Beyond, I don't believe it. I remember that show. And they said, yeah, they're rebooting it. But this was with a German director. He was lovely, 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 lovely. And it was shot in Los Angeles in this grand old house. And I was this sweet old grandmotherly type, landlord, owner of the house, although I wasn't that. Come to find out I wasn't that sweet and loverly. But yeah, it was great to be a part of. Yeah.
Did I know they shoot the scenes separately for Frakes and then the dramatizations, but did you get to meet Jonathan Frakes?
No,
Okay.
no.
Just had to ask.
I know. I did too, but
So correct me if I'm wrong, but they did bring you back to voice Linda in the Evil Dead video game.
hmm
Had you worked in?
Yeah, I did Linda and a bunch of other, screams and a couple of other and the narrator. I actually thought it was Linda as the narrator, but it was Linda, and then I did some of the narration, the female narration, a couple screams. But yeah, that was a lot of fun.
Have you done much voice work, or was that pretty much?
I have, but in my later years, not. Now I actually do a bunch of foreign voice dubbing.
Mm.
Or I will watch a film, in a studio in Russian or Turkish or Spanish or French, and then we'll dub it into English, which is its own can of worms, but a delightful one. It's really actually a lot of fun.
I've had a lot of previous guests that do dubbing say that it's almost a musical skill, and if you have like a musical background, you can kind of time the beats, and it's a little bit more easier.
Yeah, it's timing the beats and looking at the mouth, and also the ability. I mean, there are production people there and producers and, writers there. And so you gotta, if she's saying, I'm going to kill you with this one gunshot, and I'm saying, hey, let's go to the park and let's see if we can play with this gun. It's clearly has a different reference, but so it's got to be kind of within the framework of what you're saying, or what you're supposed to be saying. But yeah, I find it challenging. It's really a lot of fun.
So, Betsy, what would you say is the best acting advice that you've been given, and who gave it to you?
Ooh. Well, I don't know if it was so much acting advice, maybe living advice. I remember sitting outside on the steps of my trailer, which I had just for the Carl Malden movie, The Word of Honor. And both Rue McClanahan and Carl Malden sat with me one day. I was living in Detroit, and they had asked me if I was married, if I had children, and are you thinking of pursuing this career? It was just between takes and such and scenes, and they both encouraged me to continue and to move out to Los Angeles if I wanted to. And actually, Rue McClanahan was very lovely, and I was a guest in her home for a few days. And it was about taking that big step. I saw it later as taking that big step. You can be very comfortable here, and it seemed that I was accomplishing a lot of things in a few years in Detroit, and but we both believe in you and think you should take that big step. I didn't see it back then as that. I just thought, I literally took it as a nice conversation we're having, on the steps of a trailer, and we're just kind of passing time, and they're very kind to be sitting, that we're all sitting here together talking. But they did it, I believe, out of earnest interest and encouragement. So I really liked that. And it was the first thing I thought of when you asked me the question. And so it still remains in my
Right.
noggin of mine.
So, the general public, us non actors, we always hear the term method acting.
Yeah.
And, but talking to actors over the years, I've kind of pieced together that each actor has their own individualized, sort of muddled together method that works for them.
Yeah.
What's your method?
Mine's the muddle method.
Whatever works.
But I do like to think about what that character is about, what he or she is trying to accomplish, what's called the backstory, what brought them to this, place in this slice of life in this moment right now. Did they grow up as an impoverished child? Were they a war veteran? Were they a child of privilege? Now that they're an adult and they're on a, street in Europe, what brought her there? What caused her to have this feeling for this gentleman on the bridge, whatever. Yeah, I just try to take the moment and be that person to the best of my ability. I would imagine sometimes I don't succeed, quite frankly, or it's not what the director or the production wanted. And they'll either tell me or they won't tell me, but that's what I got out of it. And so I'll go with that. I'm not a deeply, deeply method actor. If I'm doing something on TV or film, I pretty much break out of character and come home and, unload the dishwasher and do a load of laundry and then take a shower and go to bed and start again. But that's not saying, I mean, there are people and characters that you have to do that, but I haven't normally done that.
What would you say is the most challenging character that you had to tackle in your career?
It was a few years ago, actually. It was, I believe it was an Amazon production called Hand of God with Ron Perlman and Dana Delaney. I played Dana Delaney's mother. I had met Dana Delaney previously in social functions, and I knew of her and I knew of her skills, but she's this beautiful woman, and I played her older, saltier, rough around the edges mother, and yet we both laughed that I was just, I don't even know if I was a few years older. I might have been a few months older than her in her real life, but with makeup and hair and voice change and lighting, they were able to pull it off. And but that was challenging for me because I also knew that production and was very conscious of the fact that we were pretty much the same age,
Mm-hmm.
and that I had to put the metal to the test and and improve myself. But I was very flattered when we wrapped after the first episode, and the director just said, he came up and hugged me. He said, "I knew you could do it. I knew you could do it all along," and that meant a lot to me.
That's
So yeah.
just curious. It just popped into my head. But have you ever been shocked by a co-star or a co-worker that was a fan of The Evil Dead that approached you about it?
Yeah, a lot of time. Yeah, a lot of crew people. It's always nice. It's always flattering. Um, and then we talk and we have some laughs. Listen, I was part of something that I guess for a few years when I decided to stop for a while and raise a family, it just wasn't a priority for me. But it was a part of my life. So, own it and go with it. And but yeah, I've had people that I'm working across from, doing scenes with, but a lot of crew members, and they'll kind of sidle up during, lunch or, at the end of a shoot or whatever, and we'll talk about Evil Dead.
So a question I like to ask everybody near the end is, have you ever had an experience that you would consider supernatural, paranormal, or an event that you can't explain?
Hmm. I don't think so. I know that would make me very scared. I don't think so. Sometimes I wish I would, but I wouldn't want to be really scared. You know,
I'm with you.
I don't like these. I don't like to hear noises at night that are not supposed to be there, and things moving or across a room. So no, I don't think I have. If I haven't, it's because I haven't acknowledged it or haven't, accepted it, or maybe my luck, I was turned the other way or something. But I don't think so.
Do you consider yourself religious or spiritual, anything along those lines?
I consider myself spiritual and of some faith. Yes.
Cool. So just to wind down here, have you seen any good movies lately?
Well, I was just on two very long plane rides, and saw, I just recently saw the Academy Award winner, Conclave.
Mm. I haven't seen it, but I've heard.
It's a phenomenal film. And I saw a couple of the Academy nomination films, and I honestly I don't go to a lot of theaters, movie theaters to watch movies. And I'm not a huge TV watcher, so a lot of them I miss. So sometimes when I'm on a long plane ride and I have the opportunity, I'll catch up on some TV or movies.
Awesome. Well, Betsy, just to put a bow on this thing here, is there anything on the horizon for you? Anything you want to share without getting in trouble?
Yeah, actually, there's a couple of things I've worked on in the last 6, 9 months that I can't. Sadly, I wish I could, but I can't. But I'm going to, I'm in a couple of small scenes in the new Ben Affleck movie, The Accountant 2, as Mrs. Beans. And um, what else? I did a Mythic Quest, which is a television show. I shot it about 7, 8 months ago, and it just came on the screen about 3 weeks ago. So that was kind of fun to see. And Quantum Leap, and I did a small feature called All the Things You Love. And I have a couple pilots out that I worked on this winter, but I just can't discuss it right now. Um,
Understood.
but I'm fortunate to be able to continue to work every once in a while. At this old age, I'm really lucky to be still working.
You got any conventions or anything coming up?
Yeah, we're going to go to the Texas Frightmare weekend in Dallas next month in May.
Awesome. That's a good one. I always hear good things about that one.
Yeah, we've never been before, so it should be a lot of fun. And Teresa will be there, and Rich Domanicore, who played Scotty. And there's this guy that does a lot of conventions, Bruce Campbell. He's going to be there and be a pain in our ass for the weekend. But It's always good to see Bruce, and he clearly brings in a huge crowd. So sometimes you get trampled by them all, but I love Bruce, and I love Bruce, and so it'll be nice to see him again.
Awesome. Well, Betsy, again, thank you for giving me some of your time. Big fan, and
You're
I
very welcome.
wish you well. You have a great rest of your day.
Thank you. Thank you so much.